a soldier from West Africa, just sent a message to the people of Kenya. Not through an army, not through a diplomatic letter, through a direct public address, recorded, distributed, and watched by thousands across the African continent. His name is Ibrahim Traoré. He is 36 years old. He runs Burkina Faso, a landlocked country in West Africa, after taking power in a military coup in 2022. He has since become one of the loudest, most controversial voices in African politics today. And his message was about one man in Kenya, a politician named Edwin Sifuna. Now, if you don't follow Kenyan politics closely, you might be wondering, why does a military leader in West Africa care about a party official in Nairobi? Why does this cross-continental message matter? And what is actually going on inside Kenya that made this moment happen? Those are exactly the right questions. And by the end of this, you will understand not just the answer, but why the answer matters for every African country still trying to figure out what democracy actually means. Let us start at the beginning. Edwin Sifuna is the Secretary General of the Orange Democratic Movement, ODM, one of Kenya's most powerful and most historically important political parties. This is the party built around Raila Odinga. If you know anything about Kenyan politics, you know that name. Raila has been running for president, fighting for his supporters, and positioning himself as the voice of the people for decades. He was jailed. He was harassed. He survived political assassination attempts. And millions of Kenyans, particularly from Western Kenya and Nairobi's poorest neighborhoods, followed him because they believed he was fighting for them. Sifuna came up through that tradition. He is a lawyer. He is sharp. He speaks directly, without the usual politician's careful evasiveness. He built a real following in Nairobi, and within ODM, he became one of the loudest voices for keeping the party honest, keeping it connected to the people who actually vote for it. Now here is where the story gets complicated, and this is the part that explains everything else. In 2022, Raila Odinga ran for president against William Ruto. He lost, in a result that many of his supporters disputed. The country was tense. ODM was supposed to go into opposition. Their job, as the losing side in the election, was to hold the winning government accountable, to ask hard questions, to represent the people who voted for them. That is how democracy is supposed to work. But then something unexpected happened. Raila entered into a political arrangement with Ruto's government. ODM ministers were given seats in the cabinet. The party that was supposed to be the opposition became part of the government it had just been fighting against. For many of Raila's longtime supporters, this felt like a betrayal. Not a political strategy, not a smart move, a betrayal. Because the people who had marched for him, who had been tear-gassed for him, who had believed in him for 20 years, nobody asked them. Nobody voted for this. It just happened. And Edwin Sifuna started speaking about it. Clearly, loudly, he began pushing back against what ODM was becoming. He argued that the party was losing its soul, that it was abandoning the people who gave it power and turning itself into something useful for the government rather than something useful for the voters. And that is when the pressure started. According to Traore's message, and according to many people watching Kenyan politics closely, Sifuna is now being targeted. Not because he did something wrong, not because he is corrupt or incompetent, but because he refuses to go along with the direction the party has taken. Because he is asking questions that powerful people do not want asked. Think about what that means for a moment. In a functioning democracy, the job of opposition is to challenge power. That is the whole point. If you remove the people who are willing to challenge power, you do not have opposition anymore. You have decoration, a fake alternative that makes the system look democratic, while changing nothing. Traore's argument is simple. What is happening to Sifuna is not just an internal party dispute. It is an attempt to finish the job of neutralizing Kenya's opposition. And if it succeeds, Kenya's democracy will be weaker for it, whether most people notice or not. Now, and this is important, we have to be honest here. Ibrahim Traoré is not a simple hero in this story. He is genuinely complicated. He took power through a military coup. He did not win an election. Under his government, Burkina Faso has seen press freedoms reduced. Journalists have been harassed. Opposition voices have been silenced. The security situation in the country, an ongoing jihadist insurgency that has killed thousands, has by most independent accounts gotten worse under his leadership, not better. So when a man who seized power by force stands up and talks about the importance of protecting democracy and genuine opposition, that is a contradiction that cannot be ignored. It must be named directly. But here is the thing about political arguments. Sometimes the person making an argument and the argument itself are two separate things. A flawed messenger does not automatically mean a false message. The question is not whether Traore's personal governance record is consistent with what he is saying. Clearly, it is not. The question is whether the structural point he is making about Kenya has truth in it. And the structural point is this: when opposition parties stop being opposition, democracies start dying quietly. That is not a radical idea. It is not a Traore invention. It is basic democratic theory. Political scientists, scholars, civil society organizations, people with no connection to Burkina Faso or any military government, have been making this exact argument about Kenya since Raila entered the broad-based government arrangement. The question of whether the voters who gave ODM its mandate were ever consulted about that arrangement is legitimate. The question of whether removing Sifuna serves democratic accountability or undermines it is legitimate. These questions do not become less legitimate because a complicated figure is raising them. Now let us zoom out, because there is a bigger picture here that most coverage misses. Burkina Faso is not alone in what it is doing. Mali and Niger have also experienced military coups in recent years. All three countries have expelled French forces. All three have broken with Western-backed international institutions. And all three have come together in what they call the Alliance of Sahel States, a new political bloc that is explicitly saying, we do not want the old arrangement anymore. We do not want French military bases on our soil. We do not want foreign advisors telling us how to run our economies. We want to make our own decisions, even if those decisions are painful. This is the biggest shift in West African politics in decades. And it is shaking the entire continent's political conversation. Now you might agree or disagree with what these governments are doing. You might think they are genuinely liberating their countries, or you might think they are using the language of liberation to justify military control. Both perspectives have serious people defending them. But what cannot be denied is this: the political language they are using, sovereignty, anti-colonialism, self-determination, resistance, is landing powerfully across Africa, especially among young people, especially among those who feel that decades of Western-aligned governance has not delivered the development, the jobs, the infrastructure, or the dignity that was promised. And when Traore delivers a message to Kenya using that language, when he frames the Sifuna situation as part of a broader continental battle against the co-optation of African political movements, he is connecting a local Kenyan story to that much larger wave of sentiment. Whether that framing is fully accurate or not, it resonates. And understanding why it resonates is essential to understanding what is actually happening in African politics right now. Kenya is not Burkina Faso. This needs to be said clearly. Kenya has a functioning constitution, regular elections, an active civil society, a free press, and a political culture that, despite all its problems, maintains genuine space for dissent and democratic competition. Comparing Kenya to a country under military rule is not analytically accurate and would be unfair. But Kenya also has real democratic vulnerabilities. The pattern of elite accommodation, where political rivals repeatedly merge into coalition governments regardless of voter mandates, is well documented. The use of state resources to incentivize political loyalty is well documented. The narrowing of genuine opposition through patronage, legal pressure, and political isolation is well documented. These are not conspiracy theories about foreign interference. They are features of Kenya's political system that Kenyan scholars, journalists, and civil society organizations have been describing and critiquing for years. Sifuna's situation sits within that pattern. And the question his case raises, can a politician genuinely resist that pattern and survive, is one that has implications far beyond his personal career. Here is something else that matters enormously right now. In 2024, Kenya experienced something remarkable. Thousands of young people, largely without leadership from any established political party, took to the streets to oppose the finance bill that Ruto's government was trying to pass. These were tax increases that many felt would make life even harder for ordinary Kenyans who were already struggling. The protests were extraordinary. They were organized through social media. They crossed ethnic lines that have historically divided Kenyan politics. They were peaceful and disciplined. And they worked. The finance bill was withdrawn. But here is the crucial detail. Those young people were not marching behind Raila Odinga. They were not marching behind Edwin Sifuna. They were not marching behind any established political party. In fact, many of them were deeply skeptical of all established politicians, including those within ODM who claimed to share their values. These were young Kenyans who had watched their parents' generation get excited about politicians who then disappointed them. They had watched opposition leaders get absorbed into governments. They had watched promises get traded for appointments. And they decided to act themselves outside the system that had let them down. That energy, that political activation, that refusal to be captured by elite structures, is still alive in Kenya. It did not disappear after the finance bill protests. It is looking for direction. It is trying to understand what to do next. And it is watching very carefully what happens to people like Edwin Sifuna. Because the Sifuna story is, in many ways, a test. It is asking a question that those young Kenyans care about deeply. Is there any politician within the established system who is actually willing to stand for something when standing cost them something? If the answer is no, if Sifuna is pushed out, silenced, or simply wears down under the pressure, then it confirms what many young Kenyans already suspect, that the political system is designed to absorb and neutralize everyone who enters it. That genuine accountability is impossible from inside. That the only way to change things is from outside. If the answer is yes, if Sifuna holds his ground and builds a real coalition around the principles he claims to represent, then something potentially significant has happened. Not just for ODM, not just for Kenya, but as a demonstration that institutional resistance to political co-optation is possible in East Africa. Neither outcome is guaranteed. Kenyan politics is unpredictable and resilient in ways that regularly surprise outside observers. But the stakes of the answer are real. And then there is the question of what all this means for 2027. Kenya's next general election is approaching, and the political map is being redrawn right now in the decisions being made inside ODM, in the alignments forming and fracturing across the political spectrum, in the choices being made by the young people who powered the 2024 protest about whether to engage with formal politics or continue building outside it. If Raila Odinga runs again for the presidency or as part of a coalition, the question of what ODM represents will matter enormously. If the party has completed its transformation into a Ruto-aligned entity, then Raila runs not as an opposition candidate, but as an extension of incumbent power. That is a fundamental change in Kenya's electoral landscape. If Sifuna's resistance within ODM succeeds in pulling the party back toward genuine opposition, or if his eventual departure triggers a new political formation that captures the energy of the 2024 protests, that is a different landscape entirely. One with new possibilities and new uncertainties. The 2027 election will not just be a competition between politicians. It will be, in a meaningful sense, a referendum on what Kenyan democracy actually is, on whether voters have a genuine choice between different visions for the country, or whether the choices on offer have already been shaped by elite negotiation long before the ballots are printed. Traore's intervention, whatever you think of him personally, has forced this question into the open at a continental level. He has named something, and in politics, naming a thing changes the conversation around it. The Kenyan government and ODM's pro-cooperation faction will push back. They will say that Traore is an outsider with no standing to comment on Kenya's democratic processes. They will say that his record in Burkina Faso disqualifies him from lecturing anyone about democratic values. They may say that his intervention is destabilizing or driven by anti-Western geopolitical motives. Some of those points are valid. Traore's democratic credentials are genuinely weak. His government has done things that directly contradict the values he is speaking about in relation to Kenya. But here is what Kenyan citizens, and particularly Kenya's politically activated youth, need to watch for. When those in power spend all their time attacking the person raising the critique instead of engaging with the critique itself, that is often a sign that the critique is hitting something real. Dismissing Traore's record is fair. Dismissing the structural argument about genuine opposition as if it is invalid simply because he made it, that is something different. That is deflection. And deflection in politics almost always protects something that deserves scrutiny. The deeper truth of this moment is not really about Traore at all. He is a catalyst, a voice from outside, who has used his platform to focus continental attention on something that was already happening in Kenya, already being contested by Kenyan politicians and citizens. The real story is about what Kenya chooses to do with its democratic institutions, about whether the people who built ODM into a movement will insist that it remain one, or accept its transformation into something more useful to the powerful and less useful to the people. About whether political accountability is a real value in Kenyan public life or a rhetorical decoration applied during elections and discarded after them. These are not questions that anyone outside Kenya can answer. Not Traore, not Western governments, not international institutions, not analysts watching from a distance. They will be answered by ordinary Kenyans, by the choices made in living rooms and barbershops and WhatsApp groups, by the decisions made by voters who have to look at their options in 2027 and decide what they actually believe democracy is worth. And that is the real weight of this moment. Not a soldier's speech from Ouagadougou, but the question his speech has placed, once again, in the center of Kenya's political conversation. Is genuine opposition still possible in Kenya? Is democracy still real? Or has the slow, quiet erosion gone further than most people have been willing to admit? What happens in the next few months will start to give us the answer. And the answer will matter, not just in Nairobi, but across every African country still trying to figure out whether democracy can actually work for its people. The pressure is real. The stakes are named. Now we watch.